October 13th, 2020 board meeting. And I call the meeting to order, please. Our board respectfully acknowledges that we are located on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded Indigenous territory of the Algonquin peoples. Ask you to stand, please. Father, can you lead us in prayer, please?
Mark, home. You want to have a prayer, Mark? I was asked to give a few words of introduction to today's prayer, and that is in this time of Thanksgiving. And first of all, I think that we should give thanks for the gift of life, because that is the greatest gift that we have received. And it's a free gift. We didn't deserve it. It is a gift from God, and we are pure gift. And furthermore, we are unique. Each one of us is unique in the sense that no one in the whole wide world, in the past or in the future, will be exactly the same as you or I am. We are all a unique person, and we are called to fulfill that promise that is in us, that life. And then we have to give thanks for the many secondary gifts, our talents, our families and children and the country, the friends. So we have to give thanks to the gift of life, and then for all the other gifts that are handed on to us freely. So let us give thanks. And it is a Thanksgiving blessing. May an abundance of gratitude burst forth as you reflect upon what you have received. May thanksgiving overflow in your heart and often be proclaimed in your prayer. May the harvest of your good actions bring forth plenitude fruit each day. May all that nourishes and resources your life bring you daily satisfaction and renewed hope. May you always be open, willing, and ready to share your blessings with others. May you never forget the generous one who loves you lavishly and unconditionally. We ask you this through Christ our Lord. Amen. And we pray for our staff and students, extended family members who have lost their lives due to the COVID-19. And we recommend to your prayers the following persons who have passed away. Mel Lilly, father of Tracy Dunlop, office administrator, support at St. Michael Fitzroy and All Saints High School. John Benoit Harrison, father of Angela Harrison, vice principal of the 7 to 12 Virtual Academy, and father-in-law of Joanne Harrison, retired executive assistant. Dorothy Charette, mother of Dennis Charette, retired manager of human resources, and mother-in-law of Lynn Charette, retired principal. May they and all our faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. I'd like to call upon Superintendent Keeley to introduce O Canada, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to say thank you first extend to Sean Kelly, principal of St. Francis Xavier High School, for showcasing one of their students to play our national anthem today. Banad Abdulaila arrived with her parents and 3 siblings from Jordan just last June. She attends St. Francis Xavier High School and is in grade 10 and is proud to be in Canada. Banan taught herself to play O Canada on an app on her device before practicing in the chapel and lending her recording to our school and to the school repertoire of versions of O Canada. We are very proud of Banan's interest, perseverance, and creativity. We are pleased to have her play O Canada to open this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Oh, please stand. Superintendent Keeley, if you can pass along my thanks. It was very good.
Of course.
So moving along on the agenda to item C2, memo from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services, Special Education and Student Services Summer Programs 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, welcome, Superintendents again.
Thank you so much. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to share our summer initiatives. On June 19th, we received word from the Ministry of Education that funding would be available to boards to develop opportunities for our students with special needs around summer learning, around mental health supports, and transition visits to students changing schools or those facing anxiety in their return to school after a 5-month hiatus from school. In just 2 weeks, our leadership team, including Dr. Lorinda Cudmore, Chief Psychologist, Dr. Elizabeth Paquette, Mental Health Lead, Becky Carter, ABA Lead, Sharon Lurher, Chief Social Worker, designed our focus for the months of July and August. I do want to take the time to commend their dedication. This tight timeline did not allow all boards to participate in this initiative, but with their dedication, they pulled it off. I do want to commend as well the staff who accepted to host sessions for the benefit of our students. So let's start with our presentation.
Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Jeff, if you mind going to the third slide, please. Right there. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Becky Carter. I'm the ABA lead, and I have 3 initiatives I'd like to discuss. The first is our junior crew program. So some of you might recognize this as has been our after-school program for the last 3 years. This is a program designed to foster social communication skills and perspective-taking skills, particularly with students with an autism spectrum disorder. So within 2 weeks, the lead of this program, one of our speech and language pathologists, Priscilla Alley, adapted this program beautifully to a virtual format, and we were able to run the program for 66 students at the junior panel with autism. We were able to hire 12 teachers to run that program, so we had nice small groups that were run. Next slide. We're also able to run a virtual peers program. So this is an evidence-based program for adolescents with an autism spectrum disorder. And its focus is really in developing friendship-making skills and social conversation skills. So we quickly adapted this program into a virtual format as well. And we had 13 students who had already received the program in school, and they were able to attend right before school started to give them that extra boost in this area before they went back to school in the fall. And we had 5 educational assistants run that program. Next slide. And there's some feedback that you can read when you have a few moments from our parents. And just the next slide, please. And last but not least, we had direct support, so direct consultation by members of our ABA or our behavior team provided support to parents during the summer months. If anyone had any challenging behavior at home, we were able to provide them with support. And our team also developed 3 webinars for families to help with the transition for students back to school. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Lorinda Cudmore. Thank you for having me. I'm going to speak to you about 3 initiatives we did this summer. The Learning Strategies transition was really targeted on the students with learning disabilities who attend our grade 5 class. So there was transition support for those students who were leaving the program, who had been, their stay in the class had been shortened because of the closure. And they were able to do, so it was offered to 32 students in that class over 4 weeks in July, facilitated by psychology staff. And they were able to create all about me packages and self-advocacy transition packages to take on to their grade 6 teachers and schools. The incoming cohort was more, the students coming into the class was more of a welcoming orientation session with their families, the teachers, and psychology staff. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So the other group was the language class students. And so over 107 primary grade students participated in 3 virtual sessions over July and August with the support of the speech language pathology staff. And they were offered what's called the LIGHTS program, which targets multiple aspects of oral language development. The students were both incoming and current students, and they were paired together wherever possible to allow for those friendships to develop for those new students coming into the program. And in all, there were 45 groups of students who were grouped in small groups of 2 to 4 with their peers in their language classes. And if I could have the next slide, please. That's just some feedback from parents in both of those programs who were very pleased with the supports over the summer. And then finally, the next slide I'd like to speak to you about is the mental health supports that were provided. And here there were 10 social work and psychology staff who offered 115 high school and elementary students individual counseling and check-ins over the summer. These were very high need students that were referred both by school and clinical staff, and they were given weekly or bi-weekly support over the summer for 6 weeks. And that's it for me.
So good evening. So I'm going to talk about some of the other sessions that we offered. So throughout the summer, we offered the virtual stress lessons. So that's very similar to the high school lessons we had been offering during the year to teach students some stress management and resiliency building skills. So during the month of July and August, we offered these in a modified virtual format of 3 sessions for students in grade 5 to grade 12. So these were students that the parents were able to self-register, similar to like signing up for summer camp. We had sent out in school newsletters a link and parents could register their children. These are just some of the topics that they addressed in these groups. And so throughout the summer, they saw over 65 students in the groups, and they ranged across the city, and again, from grades 5 to grade 12. And next slide, please. Then the third budget that we had was specifically addressing transition supports. So we identified the students going from grade 6 to grade 7 as being one of our target populations, since they would have missed out on many of the transition visits in May and June and those activities. So the elementary schools nominated students that they felt, due to high levels of anxiety around the transition, could benefit from this. So the parents were contacted in August, and it was set up that they could attend a school visit the week before school started. The mental health workers met with the students, took them on a tour of the school, and offered them a session focusing on learning about stress and that it's normal to be anxious in this type of situation, and what were some positive coping strategies that they could be using. Their parents were also invited to attend a virtual session, just as school was starting up, to review some of the strategies that had been taught to their children and how they can reinforce those at home. So we ended up having 94 students attend this group across all of our high schools, and school-based staff also supported this, and many of them attended the groups as well for the students to get to know them. And then the second part was recognizing that this was going to be a difficult transition for students, and it wasn't just going to get resolved in the first few days of school. So we offered to staff to come in those 2 weeks before school started. So we had over 275 staff who came in on some half days, some full days, some multiple days, and they met either in-person transition meetings with the student and their parents. Some it was the parents weren't comfortable coming in, so they offered virtual meetings and just went over reviewing what were their needs, how the time off had been, what the parents were most concerned about. During these meetings, over 4,000 students were supported with their transition planning, whether it was reviewing their IEPs, etc. And then through the month of September, because the budget lasted till September 30th, we increased the time in EAs. So the EAs that were 0.75 or 0.5 had the opportunity to increase their time to 1.0 for the month of September. And this helped with the beginning and the end of the day, which we know is often a difficult transition time for students. So they could ensure that they had that continuity, leaving the end of the day, ending on a positive note, and then the EA to greet them back in the morning when they return to school. So this has been very well received by the schools and the support that was offered. And I think that's the end.
So, Mr. Chair, we're very pleased with the impact that these programs have had on students in our system, and we're happy to take any questions that you would have at this time.
Great. Any questions? Trustee Lawrence, then Trustee Armstrong, then Trustee Curry.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, this is really impressive, folks, so thank you very much. I see that most were referred to the programs that they enrolled in through the school or through professionals that had probably worked with these students before the pandemic. Was there any, I'm thinking particularly the mental health one, Dr. Cudmore, was there any possibility that that was advertised as well, that parents throughout the summer could have signed up for that, for their, sign their children up or whatever, or what, you will answer it. I'll stop.
Yes, sure. Through you, Mr. Speaker. We did have some other referrals that came in over the summer, so we were targeting and tracking those over the summer. There weren't many. I think they had identified some of the neediest kids in the system, but to go to a broad, open sort of kind of free referral system, we were concerned that we would end up getting referrals for kids beyond our board, and it became very much of a logistic kind of nightmare. So we decided to stay with the students that the schools and the clinicians knew were really seeking that additional support for this summer.
Great, thank you very much. That's great.
Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. My question's for Becky Carter, and it's in regards to the Crew Junior program. Can you tell us more about what the training involved for the 12 teachers to facilitate the virtual Crew Junior program?
Sure. We were lucky to have a number of the teachers that we hired. So the majority of them had run the program already. So we had only had to hire maybe 2 or 3 teachers who hadn't already run the program. So they had previous experience facilitating the program, and so they would have had prior training. So the teachers who were newer to the program or new to the program, the speech and language pathologist and myself, they did a morning training session with us where we went over the background of the program, the importance of facilitating social communication skills with individuals on the spectrum, why we target these skills, and then provided them with support as needed throughout the program.
Thank you.
Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is to Lorinda Cudmore. In the Lights program, which was a language class and it was presented virtually, is from your experience this summer, is the virtual format the way to go in the future? I mean, are you able to offer it more in a more widespread fashion because it's virtual, or is there some challenges in it being virtual that really doesn't make it the best way to present it?
Through you, Mr. Speaker, thank you for your question. As you can imagine, the language class students are grade 1, 2, 3 students. And so we had some very interesting stories about how they were able to be on screen in the summer, whether it was 2 or 3 of them. And lots of times they saw more feet and heads and bottoms than they saw faces, and had to sort of keep them, bringing them back to the screen to do the session with them. I think they benefited. It's a possibility, a way of doing things, certainly with our kids in our virtual academy right now. It's a wonderful way to reach out to them. But I think we have to have a mix of both working with students individually in person, as well as providing that kind of service, I believe, especially with those younger ones, because they have a harder time accessing the service through the screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. May I ask another question, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
To Dr. Paquette, I was just wondering, the transition supports, you mentioned that there were 4,000 students involved. Did that number amaze you, or is that what we should have expected, or is that below or above what you think, or does that indicate there's really a need for these transition supports and that there are a lot of students who are anxious about their new environment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the number didn't surprise me in the sense that I would recognize there was that number of students that could benefit. What did amaze me is the number of staff who rose to the occasion to do this work. And I know every year teachers always come in the week or 2 weeks before and often have these meetings. It was nice this time to be able to compensate some of that time that they did. But we had many EAs come in. Some of our system class teachers had small groups of the kids that were going to be joining the class come in and meet, so it allowed for a smooth transition. So I think there are things that we did learn this year that I would like to propose that we do on a regular basis moving forward, recognizing we won't have the funds, but even the transition grade 6 to grade 7 groups, many parents and students said how beneficial just that 2 hours was for them in that transition. So I think that's something that our clinical staff who are back at work that week, for example, could run that type of program in every high school next year going forward. We could build up the curriculum and make that part of our practices, and I think that would be very beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry.
Sorry, I just had one other quick question to, I think, Becky Carter. With the supports for the ABA and everything, all the students that are involved in these programs, is there follow-up after, like now, or to see how they're doing and if these programs are effective, or do we just leave it go, or is there follow-up by someone?
That's a good question. So the kids that participated in the crew program, for example, all of those kids right now are being invited back to go through the program again. So they'll have a chance to go through, and the full version of the program which is an 8-week program. And what we did in the summer was just condense it down. The lead on that is inviting all of those families through the schools out to that right now. The kids in the peers program, so all of their school teams knew that they are participating in that program because they put those students forward. So they would have, what we do is we typically give an overview of the program, the skills that we targeted, so that the students, classroom teachers and resource or inclusive teachers are able to see exactly what did we target, so that maybe a student has an IEP and they can continue to work on that skill should they need to. So there's that communication there, as well as the younger students. And then we have a large behavior team this year. We were able to hire 2 new behavior analysts to our team. So with our large team of 13 individuals, we provide direct support to schools and students on a daily basis. So some of those students would be receiving support through us. I guess our main job is to support the teachers and supporting the students. So we try to do that wraparound there, because it's really important, as you kind of alluded to, that we make sure that we generalize those skills beyond just a one-time program back into the school setting, back into the community. So we want to make sure that whatever we're targeting, that other people know what we're targeting as well. So to open up that communication between the school team and to the families. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, just a supplementary. So no students would fall through the cracks or have done this and then there was no follow-up at the local school after?
Well, I can't say for sure that there was or wasn't follow-up through the school team, but we try our best to provide the information of what we targeted and the skills that were targeted for those individual students with the school team. But you bring up a good point of how maybe we can, strengthen our ties and our follow-up with these students, so that we're making sure a little bit more concretely that these students aren't falling through the cracks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, ladies, for your presentation.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you're seeing all the videos. Trustee Simpson has been looking to ask a question as well.
Sorry, Trustee Simpson, go ahead.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Dr. Paquette, you had mentioned that you had increased EA time by a quarter in many instances to just cover the entrances and exits at the end of the day, which is always a problematic time. Do you think that is, do you view it as a benefit? Is this a practice that maybe we should look at trying to endorse in coming years? Because it does have to do with transitions. I realize that we do have extra monies for mental health right now with COVID, but how do you assess this increase in time as being successful or not much of an impact at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. In terms of looking at the impact, I think the best people to comment on that would be the principals and the educators that actually work with the staff on a daily basis. From my lens, it's always that end of day and first thing in the morning that are very challenging for kids, that transition from home to school and then from school back to home. And we know that if we can bridge that time, it's much more successful. So that if a student leaves school feeling good about themselves and on a positive note, they're much more likely to want to come back the next day. And the same thing then in the morning, it's easier to get them in and ready for school. So that's the theory behind whether or not, or behind the idea of increasing this time for the staff. And also, to be honest, it was an easy way to spend some of the money, because knowing there wasn't that many EAs out there that we could call upon quickly in September to bring them up to speed for a short period of time, because the budget was only till the end of the month, and also recognizing that that was a way of validating our own staff that we already have. Most took up on the offer, some weren't able to because of their personal family limitations. So there were many reasons why we did it that way, but I do believe it is beneficial for the students.
Is there any other questions? Thank you, ladies, for your informative presentation. Moving on to item D, there's no delegations, there's no public session. Can I have a mover for the approval of the agenda, please? Moved by trustee Whitted, seconded by trustee Warren. That the agenda for the regular board meeting of October 13th, 2020 be approved as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no declarations of conflict of interest. Confirmations of the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 22nd, 2020. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee McEwen and trustee Lawrence. That the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 22nd, 2020 be adopted as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no unfinished business from previous meetings. There's no trustee motions. Presentation and consideration of committee reports. Item K1, memo from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services, Special Education Advisory Committee minutes of June 17th, 2020.
To be received, Mr. Chair, to be received.
Trustee Armstrong?
Oh, just wanted to move it.
Okay. Seconded by trustee Moore. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services dated September 24th, 2020 and entitled Special Education Advisory Committee minutes of June 17th, 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L1, presentation and consideration of staff or trustee reports. Memo from the Superintendent of Student Success Elementary, Child Care Services 2020. Superintendent Montgomery, welcome.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to Holly Overhoff, our Manager of Early Years Services. Holly will give you an overview of our licensed childcare services, extended day programs, our early on centers, and our ESL preschool centers. She will also share with you a brief overview of our summer programs and how they progressed with the COVID-19 guidelines. Holly has been an amazing leader through all of this and has pivoted like many of us with these short timelines. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Holly.
Welcome,
Thanks.
Holly.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to come speak to you a little bit about what's happening in childcare. And thank you, Jeff, for loading up that screen. Okay, so I think many of you have had a chance to see this presentation or will after the fact. As Shelley mentioned, it's all about all of the different programs that we have running in the schools. So for some of you, it will be a brief review, and for some of you, there might be some new information. And this is just a happy quote from one of our parents who was ecstatic to be able to secure a space for his young child. Next slide, please, Jeff. So this is what it looks like in our schools right now. We have 25 licensed childcare programs operating through third-party providers, which is also known as tenants. They offer childcare for children from 6 weeks old all the way to 12 years. Some of them are infant, toddler, preschool programs only. Some of them are kindergarten, school-age programs only. Some of them have a bit of a combination. All 25 of them are licensed by the Ministry of Education, and currently, all 25 of them have about a combined total enrollment of about 64% of what we normally would see. Next slide, please, Jeff. So here is the Ottawa Catholic Childcare Corporation, which has 20 sites. We are the largest third-party provider in the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and there is a list of where we run our 20 sites from. We do have 19 programs have kindergarten school-age components. One program is toddler preschool only, and then 13 of our programs have a combination of ages. They range all the way from 18 months to 12 years of age. And the next slide, please. And then here are 5 other tenants that we have running in our schools. They're all infant, toddler, preschool. None of these tenants have kindergarten school age. That's just the corporation that runs those. So here's where we find our partners, these 5 schools. And summer. So you may recall all the way back in June, we were informed on June 9th that we could open childcare on June 12th. And nobody did that. But we worked very, very hard to have quick turnaround and to assist the families who did need us, who were heading back to work. And it was an incredible amount of work, and everyone pulled together in licensed childcare. We received guidelines from the Ministry of Education and Ottawa Public Health. We had many questions about these guidelines and how that was going to look in our programs. We all scrambled to access government sustainability funding, which is offered typically only to licensed childcare programs. We collaborated with the school board on accessing our spaces again, as they were still closed, and worked with planning and facilities very closely on determining our new custodial and caretaking requirements. We all had to develop COVID-19 policies for the families and for the staff and to review it with everyone. It was a big, big learning curve in a short period of time. We had to order all of the PPE, as you all know how that goes in the schools. It's a short supply right now, so we had to do that well in advance. Reconfigured all of our spaces. We had to figure out what childcare looks like when you're promoting social distancing and having fewer numbers in the classroom. We had to store furniture, remove carpets, get rid of a lot of the shelves, turn everything around to promote a little bit more of small group and one-on-one type play. And we had to review all of our schedules, our transitions, our materials, our activities. Everything looked different with the advent of COVID-19. Traditional childcare, it was still childcare. We knew that. We knew that not everyone was going to be 6 feet apart all the time. And some of these little ones were 18 months old in our cases. So we just had to revamp everything and practice. We had staff in the programs walking through doorways and into classrooms and changing all of our timelines to make sure that we were being as safe as absolutely possible. And we did staff training. We did a lot of professional development with our staff. We were very proud of how positive everyone was and how professional everyone was with the return to work after being at home for so long and supporting families virtually as best we could. And then, of course, the ministry gave us some priority registration criteria for interested families. So we wondered about that all along. Who is determining who is getting these spaces? But there was a very cut and dried formula for who was actually accessing the spaces. And so that made it easier for us. Next slide, please. And then we move to extended day programs. So typically we have 44 extended day programs or EDPs at the Ottawa Catholic School Board. And right now there are 32 of those in operation. They are non-licensed recreational before and after school programs for 4 to 12-year-olds only. So everybody has to be going to school to access these programs. Unlike licensed childcare, they run 100% on parent fees. There's no government funding for these up until now. Anyways, the enrollment numbers and the wait lists were extremely low this year due to COVID-19. We estimated that we saw about an 85% decrease in the demand for the programs. And so the decision was made together with the school board to proceed with 32 of the most feasible for now, albeit at a significant deficit. And we are monitoring all the wait lists to see what's going to happen in the future with the ones that are closed as well as with the ones that are open. Next slide, please. And here's where you'll find the 32 extended day programs right now, running right across the city. All geographical areas are complemented here. Next slide, please. And now we move to early on centers. And so we have 6 of these in the Ottawa Catholic School Board. These are resource programs for caregivers and parents and their children 0 to 6 years of age. We typically only see children 0 to 3 years of age because as soon as full day kindergarten came to town, we lost those 4 and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds to the full day school. So it's mostly the little ones now. And we have been closed for the entire time. We've yet to reopen our in-person support at this point. We are doing everything virtually, but we have recently received guidelines from the ministry as well as Ottawa Public Health on a safe reopening. And we hope to open these 6 sites to very small numbers in a very safe way soon. And to the right, that's where you'll see where these 6 programs are located. Next slide, please. And finally, we have some ESL preschool centers. We have 2, one at St. Joseph Adult School and one at St. Patrick Adult School. They are long-running programs for toddlers and preschoolers. However, those adult learners did not return to in-person school in September, and therefore there was no need for childcare. But I am in communication with the continuing education department to talk about what's going to happen next term and what is the need for childcare, if any, at that time. So to finish off with some successes, and we did see a lot of successes in 2020, despite a global pandemic and running at significant deficits right across the board, regardless of the program, we were able to pool together our resources from the summer and come up with some best practices, some learned lessons, some successes, and we shared that from licensed childcare with both the extended day program supervisors and the kindergarten teaching teams, the RECEs and the Ontario certified teachers. And I think that was really appreciated by them, that we were the guinea pigs this summer and opened up and learned something for everyone. And we have 82% of our elementary schools are offering something. They're either offering a licensed program, an EDP, or an early on center to support families and children right now. And we do have 1,590 children across the board right now that are accessing care. We've heard from many families who are grateful for everything that the school board and our department has done to ensure a safe return for these children. And we're getting some good vibes from the staff. They are happy to be back. They are happy to be doing their normal work. They are engaged, they're committed, and they're seeing successes in the children, and they feel the gratitude of the families. So we consider all of those great success. And that's it, unless Shelley, did you have something that you wanted to add?
No, thank you, Holly. And at this time, we're prepared to answer your questions. Thank you.
Welcome.
Trustee Armstrong. I'm going to defer it to Holly Overhoff because she is the one that took the lead on this and created some amazing resources that we were able to share with our kindergarten staff. So I'll turn it over to you, Holly.
Absolutely. And through you, Mr. Chair, once we got all set up and we got a little bit more comfortable with what we were doing, we had our staff come up with videos of their programs and what it would look like. And that's how we promoted to families, because as you know, families are not permitted to come in past the foyers of schools right now. And so typically we would have them touring programs and we would have them coming in and helping getting their children settled or picking their children up at the end of the day. Without that piece, we felt it was important for the kindergarten teaching teams to see what we looked like. So I think it was the question on everyone's mind. What does it look like? What does childcare look like in September? What does kindergarten look like in September? So we were able to provide visuals for those staff, which were very much appreciated. And just a lot of best practices, like if you set up your screening table here, here's a whole bunch of information that parents really like to know because they can't walk right into the school. Have your menu there, have your flow of the day there, have some wonderful quotes from the children, have some pictures. And of course, we have permission to do all that within the program. So that's how we did it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Simpson.
Ryan and I sit on the Child Care Corporation Board of Directors, and I think I can speak for both of us in complimenting Holly and her staff for the incredible effort that they put forward in getting the summer programs up and running and planning and being proactive with a lot of things so that successes are being realized as well. So thank you on behalf of all of us. I'd like to my question surrounds interest in extended day programs. I realize that we are running at a deficit and I realize that numbers are low. Is there any plan to have parents, communication with parents that they don't have programs running in their school because of low numbers, but if parents were aware that if the numbers got raised to a certain ceiling, the program might be viable? Because I feel for some parents, especially in the area that I represent, without childcare provided by the school, they probably aren't able to go back to work.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, We did communicate with all of the families of the programs that could not reopen in September to let them know the very important step of putting themselves on the City of Ottawa Child Care Registry and waitlist. That is a parking lot, if you will, for families during regular times, and that's how we're gauging the interest. So we explained the steps to all of them of how to do that. And together with Superintendent Montgomery and Superintendent Shimmons, we have committed meeting monthly to go over those lists and to go over what the deficit looks like in the programs that are open right now to see where it may be feasible to try and reopen something else.
Thank you. That's great to know.
Trustee Moore, then Trustee Coburn.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. Holly, I was just wondering, what do parents do if they've decided now it's after Thanksgiving and they're more comfortable with everything, they want to try an EDP? How do they go about doing that?
Great. And through you, Mr. Chair, they would simply put their names on the wait list for the programs that were closed, and they can go on the wait lists for the ones that are open too. We're going to the wait lists daily. Our numbers are so low that we're confident we can accommodate all of the children who are currently on the wait list into the programs now that we're in full swing. And then we'll monitor the ones that did not open in September. And everybody is always welcome to go on there. We're in constant communication with them. And we're meeting with communications this week to update the website to make sure that all of the information is as accurate for parents as possible.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Trustee Coburn.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate Cindy's comments with regards to Holly and her team in terms of their transition plan to get childcare up and running. And just comment on a couple of things. Holly raised the fact that some of these programs are running in a deficit position, so that always catches the eye of an accountant. But we have an incredible accountant who works in the Child Care Corporation who accessed a number of federal programs that allowed us to support our staff through this transition. So as many of you would be aware, through COVID, it's been a challenge for employers to support their staff. The other piece of that is because the Child Care Corporation has been so physically well managed, there are reserves in there. So we have reserves in there that we were able to draw upon through this. So again, it's not a question, but it's just a point of emphasis as to how well run the Child Care Corporation is from a financial or fiscal point of view.
Is there any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Holly. You gave us a great explanation of all the preparations and changes that you'd done to prepare for the COVID environment. And I think you said everything looks different. I was wondering, are there things that you learned from preparing for this COVID environment that you'll be able to carry forward in the future that might make the program more efficient or better for those involved? Are there things that you learned from doing all these preparations that you see, oh, maybe we should be doing that all the time, whether it's normal times or COVID times?
Thank you. That's a great question. And through you, Mr. Chair, I would think I would go back to how we virtually promoted our programs over the summer. I think once we get back to normal, and we hope we certainly will, parents are busy, and this might be actually a great opportunity as opposed to having them take time off of work to come in and visit us during the school day or during the childcare day. We have now some resources that we've come up with to promote our programs, to virtually tour the program. I think parents were very satisfied with that this summer, and there will always be ones who want to come in and actually feel what it's like to be in there. But I think that was a time saver for a lot of parents, and we would certainly look to keep that up if they were interested in that in the future.
Oh, okay. Mr. Chair, supplementary, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, thank you. Holly, you mentioned about all the extended day programs, and I think you said that all the geographic areas were covered. But I noticed in the list, like St. Mary's, Gloucester, and St. Catharines, and well, of course, St. Michael, Fitzroy Harbor weren't included. some of the more rural schools. Is there a reason why the programs aren't offered there? Is there just no interest, or do we continually do outreach to try to establish them there, or is it just that that they're sort of a more rural society and they don't need it?
Good question. And through you, Mr. Chair, St. Michael Fitzroy has never had an extended day program. It is one of the 4, I think, schools that the interest has just never been there. We have surveyed the school family before, and it just has not been something that's needed. But we will continue to do that, perhaps not every year, but every second year or so, we talk to the principal and we see if there is interest in us resurveying the families as they change over and needs might change. And we'd certainly look to reopen or to open one if necessary. St. Mary Gloucester does have an ADP program. It is running right now. And St. Catherine only opened a couple of years ago. That's a toughie, and it's a tough one to staff because there's no public transit there either. So it's always been a very small program in the 2 or 3 years that it's been running. And this year the numbers were really, really not there. So, is it a rural thing? Potentially, and potentially those few families that were accessing the care before were not called back to work or had the option of working from home this time. So it's on our radar, and we'll certainly look to open it where we can.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, ladies, for your presentation. Can I get a motion? Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Simpson. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Student Success Elementary dated October 13th, 2020, entitled Child Care Services 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item K2, memo from the Superintendent of Human Resources, elementary principal leading during a pandemic. Welcome, Mr. McCabe.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Tonight, I am certainly pleased to be joined by Shelley Leonet, principal of St. Leonard Elementary School, who will share her experience in dealing with one of the first COVID cases in Ottawa. Shelley, along with her vice principal, Allison Hicks, navigated a particularly challenging situation. And I'm grateful that Shelley is here tonight to share some of the St. Leonard story. Thank you, Shelley.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me this evening to share experiences at St. Leonard's School. This was uncharted territory for all of us, and definitely not something that we are excited to have been one of the first to have experienced. When facing the start of the school year, we had 3 goals in mind, and they were to be as proactive as possible, remain as calm as possible, and to have open communication and transparency with our staff and with our parent community. Being proactive started right away. When we had our PD days, we sat as a staff and we talked about the possibility of COVID coming into our school. We talked about how we could prepare. Part of our PD days were about PPE and disinfecting our environments and keeping ourselves safe. We also talked about creating and updating workspaces, writing introductory letters, contacting parents, and having our important resources that we need to teach, having them available to us to take home if we need. Within the first 6 days of school, we had our first case at St. Leonard. We had a parent contact me on a Sunday evening to let me know that her child had tested positive. Our guidelines, we had already gone through this and knew that our guidelines were to call Mary Donahue, which I did. We did not have an OPH nurse assigned to us at that point, so Mary helped me to navigate that. She found someone, a public health nurse, that contacted me and talked me through all of the steps of the things that we needed to do over the next few days. Communication was key. My goal was to ensure that by the end of that first day on Monday, that I would be able to talk to the staff and to the parents about what we needed to do. I wanted the staff to know from me that there had been a positive case in our school. I didn't want them to hear through the letters that would be going home that evening. So Allison Hicks and I worked really hard on Monday with OPH and with Mary to have everything set up, all of the contact lists, everything ready so that we could tell the community by the end of the day. We pulled the affected staff together and told them that there was a positive case in their classrooms so that they had the opportunity to gather everything they needed before they left the building that day. And we had a whole staff meeting in our gym, and so that we could tell the staff what was happening, that there was a positive case within the school, and that we had already spoken to all of the affected staff members so that they knew that it wasn't them, and everyone was feeling comfortable. We answered as many questions as we could in that moment. It was still early days, so we didn't have all the answers, but we answered everything that we could. Shortly after that, OPH sent us the letters that needed to go home. We had a letter that went to the affected staff and students. We had a letter that went out to the entire school community, and a letter that went out to all of the staff. We sent the letters, but once the families received those letters, we found that there was missing information. The letters that were sent, they're form letters. And so it was missing, they were missing a bit of information, such as what particular class was affected. The letter goes out and says that your child has been affected, your child has been in an environment where there has been a positive case, but if the family has more than one child, they didn't know which child. Another piece of information that the parents needed was the last date where there had been contact with the child that was positive, so that helped them with their testing going forward. These are things in the early days that we didn't know that the parents would need to know. So when we came to work the next day, the phones were ringing and our emails were full. So our office administrators, Allison Hicks and I, spent that first day on the phone and answering emails and getting out as much information as we could to calm nerves and to just to get information out. We collected over that day, we collected all of the questions that we were receiving and we recorded them all. And I write a newsletter that I send out to parents every Sunday. So we took all of those questions and we answered them all in a newsletter, because we thought if we have these people calling us with these questions, chances are there are many more people out there that have the same questions. And we wanted to avoid any rumors that might be happening. There was a rumor that there was a third case at our school, which there wasn't. And so we were hearing all of these things. So we thought we'll answer all of the questions. We will do it in the newsletter where most of our information is sent out on Sundays. And that helped. That helped to relieve some of the anxiety. 2 days later, we had a second case. It was unrelated to the first case, but we were more prepared. We had the form letters that needed to go out, but this time we added to it. We added which class was affected. We added the last day of contact, and we reiterated the steps that we knew that parents needed to know. And that next morning, after that information went out, there were no emails and there were no phone calls. And at first I thought maybe the letter hadn't gone out. And I was a bit concerned that all of these children would be coming to school in this closed class, but they didn't come. So we realized the information that we had sent out was exactly what they needed. And there was no need for them to contact us. They had all the information that they needed to go forward, which was great. The next steps since that time, I have reached out to some of the principals that were faced with cases in the coming days after that, just to sort of help them to navigate what was going to be happening. I will be sharing at a Family of Schools meeting as well about our experiences. And I spoke to our public health nurse about the letters and the roadblocks that we faced during those first few days. And she informed me that they will be updating those letters, and that perhaps they may have since then. Thankfully, I haven't needed them again so far. But they said that they would be adding into those letters the return date, which was something that the parents wanted to know, and the last date of contact. There was some discrepancies because they were still creating the letters. They were still getting information out. So I think hopefully that is settled. The biggest supports for Allison and I and for our entire school, Mary Donahue walked us through everything that we needed to do. We had nightly phone calls. She contacted me daily. She was a godsend for me. I was so thankful for her every day that she checked in with me. And our public health nurse, Natalie Lair, she was the same. I had daily emails, phone calls, texts. She came to school to visit. I walked her through the school and showed her the setup that we had. She gave us some suggestions. She was really, really, really amazing. Both of them helped us to answer all of the questions. There were so many questions that the parents had, that our staff had. And at that point, because it was such early days, we didn't have the answers. And so Mary and Natalie assisted us and got us through that, which I can't believe that it was only a few weeks ago. It feels like it was yesterday, and it feels like it was years ago. But we're on the other side of it right now. And I think that it really helped our school community to become stronger. And I believe that our parent community as well, the trust that was built there through the whole process it's been really amazing. So
Mr. Chair, thank you. So if I could just add that through Shelley's leadership, it was really a question of managing a lot of anxieties in the community that sort of popping up on social media and so on, and working with her teachers, her educators, and all staff at St. Leonard. So thank you, Shelley, for your testimony and experience, and we'd be pleased to take any questions.
Trustee Warren.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Shelley, for that great update. It's pretty insightful to see it from your point of view, and I can imagine the stress and anxiety that it creates with all levels of staff, including Tom's team, and Mary has been a huge support for this. I don't think you guys sleep at all. So one of my schools is St. Joseph's High School that we're dealing with right now, where the Ottawa Public Board has deemed it to be closed between grades 9 and 12 for a select few positive. I guess they're still doing their investigation on that. So I'm not only a trustee for that school, but I also have a child who's in that school as well. And I'm seeing it from two different point of views, where I get to live and breathe kind of, I get to see it from a parent point of view. I also get to see it from a trustee point of view, and also trying to help educate our parents that are going to that school as well. I guess the question I have for you is what are some of the challenges and successes that you've seen this year? And is there something that, as a trustee, we can do to help promote and make it more successful for the school in these challenging times?
The biggest challenge that I faced, and I faced this in early days, and I know that this challenge, it's even more challenging now, is the wait times. We find out that there's a positive case, but OPH has to verify that case before it can become public knowledge. And in a rural setting, in Manotick, many of our families get tested in rural settings. So that test is positive there, but then I believe that that information has to be transferred to Ottawa Public Health. So there's a bit of a lag time there. That was the biggest challenge for me, is knowing that there was a case. I knew that the child had not returned to school, so I wasn't worried about that. But it was just knowing and not being able to say anything, because you have to follow the processes. That case has to be verified before it can go out to the public. And I think that that's the biggest thing. I think that families, especially in the early days, families may feel that we're holding back information, and we're not. We're giving them every bit of information we're allowed to give. And the communication that comes out to families, that's directed by public health. It's not me saying or Tom or Mary saying, this is what we're going to say, this is what we're not going to say. It is public health saying, we have this information, we will share it once we have verified. I think that's the biggest roadblock, and that's the biggest thing that I hope that parents know, is that we are sharing everything we can in the moment that we're allowed to do that.
Just as a supplementary to that, are you finding that the feedback from parents when there is a closure of classes or a school, that there's a gap of learning or education? Because I'm seeing it from my point of view with my daughter, where I'm openly talking to her, and she's very open and honest with me. She's grade 9, and she's saying that she has no schoolwork to do. she has about 30 minutes on the off day, she has about 30 minutes worth of work. But really that's just her dragging it out. In reality, she doesn't really have anything on the off days, but now that she's closed potentially for 2 weeks, there could potentially be a gap for learning there. So I'm just wondering if you've had feedback from parents at your school, or if you've noticed it with, and again, this is no fault of the teachers or staff or anything. It's just, it's kind of going through the situation we're going through and kind of learning through osmosis that, we have to adapt to these, but is there something you've noticed from that?
So in our first, we have workspaces that the staff have set up for the students to work from. So the classes that were closed, the first class that was closed, those teachers of that class are very tech savvy. So they already had their workspaces up, they were ready to go. They were doing some Google Meets with the students, and they were off to their races. The second class that we had closed, that teacher is not as tech savvy. And so she relied more on emails and phone calls for parents. But both of them were able to create work that they were able to send out to the students. But we also have to keep in mind, when there is a closure, that the staff have been sent home because of a closure too. It's really emotional for these staff members and for the kids. It's scary to have a class closed because someone in your class has COVID, and now everyone's on edge, wondering, am I going to have symptoms today? Do I have a scratchy throat? I don't know. It's really scary. So I think we have to give a moment to the staff. I definitely sent this out to the parents in my community that you will receive workspace work. You will be touched. Your teachers will touch base with the children in whatever way that they're capable of doing in this time. And we were 6 days in, so we were not quite completely set up. But that we have to remember that not only is the stress on the children that went home, it's also on the staff. So we have to give them a little bit of time to be able to take in that information and to process it. And then they're going to get into what needs to happen over the 2 weeks, the 2 week closure. But it does take a little bit of time.
Thanks for your answers and for being honest about it. Thank you so much.
Trustee Coburn, then Trustee Armstrong.
Shelley, thank you for telling your story with regards to this. I appreciate it. This question is probably more directed to Mary or possibly Tom, but it's really the relationship with OPH and the turnaround time with regards to things. So maybe Mary, you can comment. You seem to be the lead with OPH, and I know this is an evolving thing, so it's new for everybody. Can you maybe comment on how that process is evolving or moving forward, so that we're not dealing with things like letters that have to be revised and things like that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I can certainly answer the trustee's question. Shelley explained it very well. She was one of our first cases. I still remember the weekend or evening calls that we had. And because of principals like Shelley and the relationship that we have with OPH, we really have been able to improve the process. So although I didn't think to let Shelley know this, the letters from OPH have certainly changed since those first letters. They include the details she spoke about, dates when students can return to school. I forget the other point, but we've worked with the principals in terms of what grades, so that parents know who they have to keep home. So it is an evolving practice. We have many more cases now, but as Shelley mentioned, as one of the first schools, she didn't have a public health nurse. So I believe all of our schools now have one, but we have 2 and 3 backups. So for instance, I'm one backup, and I have a direct line with OPH, and I can say that my contact, 7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day, will get back to me within about 15 minutes. So when she's off, I always know. So for instance, over the long weekend, I knew who the person was who was replacing her for the 2 days that she had off. So they're phenomenal with getting back to us. So if we had a case still where there wasn't a nurse for a particular school for some reason, we would get someone assigned there within about half an hour. they are I meet, as you probably know, with my colleagues in the other three boards once a week with OPH formally. It's tomorrow morning. That's every Wednesday. But we also, I talk to my contact probably 2-3 times a day. And so it is evolving over time. And although the number of cases have increased in the city, as we all know, the communications, the turnaround times are very quick. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. But I have a great relationship with OPH, and we're really working as partners. I just got an email this evening saying we want to tweak this. What do you think, Mary? We could start it in today. So I said yes, to a particular improvement in the process. But it's because of people like Shelley who've been able to share with me and their colleagues lessons learned that I truly feel it's an evolving process that both from OPH's end and the school board as being perfected each day. So I'm not sure if that's completely answered the trustee's question, but that's been my experience. And I should mention, just from my perspective, I've downloaded this onto some of the superintendents as well. So the family school superintendents are involved now, the principals are all involved, and we're sort of distributing the work. So we don't just have 1 or 2 people with all the knowledge, but I certainly still am the contact with OPH.
Well, that's good. Thank you.
Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Shelley. Just with the experience that you've had in your elementary school, it's my understanding that the province of Ontario has provided face shields for students from kindergarten to grade 3. Are you able to give us an idea of the numbers of these students that have been supplied with a shield in your school?
Yes. So we were provided with a few boxes of shields. And so I have been in my newsletters each week, I put in information about the shields and ask parents to let me know if they would like one. And what I've been doing is I've been having the shields go home with the child so that the parents can fit them and practice with them and show them how they wear it. And then they bring it back to school, and then they are able to wear it in class. We send it home once a week so that the parents can disinfect it and it comes back. We haven't had many parents that are interested in their children wearing it. We have about 10 families that asked for them. We do have some reading programs in our school as well, so we have them available to students that are in the reading programs too, because they are they're not sharing books, but they're in a smaller space together, just to allow for that extra protection. But not many families have approached me for it yet, but I do continually put it in the newsletters to offer it up.
Thank you.
Trustee Curry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Shelley, I was just wondering, you mentioned in your first case that the parent had phoned you, and that's how you knew. Was that the same situation with the second case? Did the parent phone you, or I thought it was that the public health were notified and they took the lead, and sometimes principals wouldn't know until the last. Has that been your experience?
With both of our cases, my experience was that the parents contacted me, one with a phone call and one with an email letting me know that their child had tested positive. So I heard from the parents before I heard from public health, but we can't move on it until public health lets us know that it is a confirmed case.
All right, thanks for that.
Trustee McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. And I'm not sure, it's kind of a general question, though, Shelley, you might have had some experience with this. So is there any issues around people trying to figure out who the COVID positive person is, student or staff, and what is done around that for protection of, I guess, everyone?
We did have some families contact us and ask us who it was or what classroom there was a positive case. We talked as an office staff with the vice principal and the office administrators and myself before we started answering phone calls or answering emails that first day. And we talked about the confidentiality part of that we're not sharing the student's name. We're not sharing the class that the student is in. The people that have children in that class, they know that it's their child's class because we need to tell them that. But anyone else that called for information, we did not share it. If they learned about it through the community, then that we can't control that. But we were not sharing any of that information.
Supplementary.
Go ahead.
So are people finding out who the COVID positive people are, and is anything happening around that?
So this one might be best for me to answer through you, Mr. Chair. So I can say with great confidence that, just like Shelley said, that none of our principals or admin staff are sharing those names. In the world of social media, we have seen cases of students, depending on their age, posting that they're positive. We've seen parents posting that their children are positive. We've seen parents telling other parents, and that happened a lot at the beginning. So obviously we can't control that. But both OPH and all of our school personnel, just as Shelley said, are highly confidential, and we're not sharing that information. I would say that our community has been amazing, and that just to go back on to what Shelley mentioned, that in I think all of our cases except 2, the parents have told the principal before we get the call from OPH. And because we have that contact with the nurse, then the principal informs the nurse confirms it, because obviously it does have to be in their system, and then they proceed with their investigation. And in cases where, often when it happens over the weekend, we have had, I know of 2 cases where I've been notified, or rather the principal's been notified. And again, it's very confidential. The only reason that, obviously the principal needs to know the name is so that we help OPH in gathering their data for high risk contacts to know who the child or staff member we're in contact with. But we have seen less and less of the social media posting by parents or students themselves, which I think is helpful. So I think that message is getting out there.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your openness and your candor, Shelley. Very much appreciated. Thank you very much for all you went through, and your courage and determination, and the not giving up, and we'll get it done. And it's all a learning curve, right? No one here has been through this kind of thing before. So great job. Thanks very much. So we've got a motion. Trustee Armstrong, are you moving it? Okay.
Yes.
Seconder. Trustee Warren. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Human Resources dated October 7, 2020, entitled Elementary Principal Leading During a Pandemic, be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L3, memo from the Superintendent Leading and Learning, Secondary Principal Leading During a Pandemic. Welcome, Superintendent Keeley and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I am pleased to introduce Sean Kelly, Principal of St. Francis Xavier High School, a school of over 1,800 students and more than 100 staff. Sean is an experienced and dynamic leader. He and his admin team understands the importance of collaboration and communication. Mr. Kelly has a clear determination and purpose of compassion to protect the health of employees and students while ensuring the best possible learning environment. He will share some of the effective strategies he has implemented to ensure that his student success during these extraordinary times. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mrs. Keeley. And I should begin. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. And I would begin by certainly indicating that at St. Francis Xavier, we don't have a trademark on positive approaches during the pandemic. Certainly, our principal group is a collaborative one, and we work together. We chat about our approaches with one another, and I think that certainly serves all of our schools very well. So just in terms of some of the approaches that we took, and we certainly put an emphasis on communication. And that began with staff and the indication from our administrative group that we would be letting staff know as soon as we were aware of something, we would bring it to their attention. And in some cases, the staff recognized that information filtering through the ministry down through the board, it took time. In some cases, feedback from Ottawa Public Health took some time, but our staff appreciated that as soon as we were able to communicate with them, that we certainly would. We had a practice of sharing a memo weekly with staff, and that certainly became the communication piece that we would put out information at the beginning of the week. This was back when we were distance learning last year, and certainly as we're dealing with the continuing pandemic issues this year. So that became our communication piece with the staff. And beginning on last year, in terms of distance education, we met frequently with staff. And frequently, we actually met once a week. And they were optional meetings. I let staff know that they didn't have to meet all of those obligations, but it was an opportunity every week to provide a session for teachers to ask questions, bring concerns to the table. We do that one week. The second week, we would have a TGIF, and it was important for us to take some time and bring some beverages to the Google Meet, and in some cases have a show and tell. Certainly that worked well with us and allowed staff to decompress a little bit in those off weeks. In addition, I met separately with office staff, our educational assistants, and our custodians. I wanted to hear what they were concerned about, what questions they had. So there was that communication that took place as well. In terms of parents and students, we had a general newsletter that would go out every week, and that became a letter from the principal to the community. And I wanted to bring some formality to that communication. I wanted parents to know that there was one individual communicating that they could ask questions of. They could get in touch if they had any specific issues that they wanted to raise. And certainly kept in close contact with our school chairperson, Karen Standen, who works as well with CSPA. And she was certainly extremely supportive through the process, continues to be, and provided great support as we navigated those waters together. Since last year, we've had an opportunity to invite the community to a number of town hall meetings. And I recognized as we started with distance learning and again into this year, it was an opportunity for parents to provide questions ahead of time and bring some answers to those questions, as well as address anything that came up at the meeting. And we anticipated some of the issues around student wellness. We had Dr. Elizabeth Paquette, our chief psychologist, present to parents as part of those town hall meetings. And certainly the feedback was good, that parents enjoyed and valued that time to share. And the last town hall meeting that we had in September, we actually recorded that and put it on our website so that parents who weren't able to participate face-to-face in the meeting online, as well as an invitation specifically to our families engaged in virtual learning, that was there for them to take advantage of. And in addition to that, in addressing our families who are learning virtually, we record all of our opening announcements, our anthem, prayer, student announcements, and we put those online as well so that our students who are virtually learning do have access to that information. We want to ensure that they remain part of the school community and recognize that they are that. In terms of collaboration, we recognize that at the outset of this situation, all of our jobs had changed somewhat. And that was recognizing the added responsibilities that our custodians had taken on, our office admin staff, and our teachers, and to talk openly about that and to recognize those different tasks that we were taking on. We needed to recognize who was sorting through PPE materials, who was looking at how we would address COVID positive situations, even the entry and exit of students and managing that. All of those expectations had to be passed to someone, and it was about recognizing the collaboration around that and anticipating those tasks and recognizing and delegating certainly proved to be helpful as we went through that. I think another area that we focused on that was proactive as well as reactive was just simply approaching the situation with compassion. And part of that was reaching out, recognizing as part of distance learning and our students, some of whom are working from home through the virtual academy, we have a large population of English language learners, reaching out to those families to ensure that they had the resources that they needed, that they were connected with the school, reaching out to any of our students with special needs that we recognized might need some additional support. So it was certainly about doing that proactively, but also recognizing that in some cases, parents had some frustrations around the model of learning that was going on, teachers having some challenges with the classroom environment, and addressing each of those circumstances with compassion as well. So looking at communication, collaboration, and compassion, and that has certainly supported us well through this process.
Thank you very much. Questions? Trustee Ward.
Thanks, through Mr. Chair. It's just a comment, Sean. Just want to have a chance to say, great work, great update. I know every school is going through a lot of stuff right now, and staff, but I appreciate the level of effort you guys have put into CFX and the hard work you've done. Thanks.
Is there any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry.
And thanks, Mr. Chair, through you to Sean. Certainly, you're doing a lot of communication and a lot of cooperation and coordination, and that's great. I was just wondering, is it too early yet to know if students are learning as well as if it were regular times? I mean, is there any yardstick yet that you're able to apply that would tell you whether they are as engaged as they would be in the former times, or if they are learning as much as they would have in the past?
Responding through you, Mr. Chair, I think keeping those lines of communication open, speaking with teachers on a frequent basis, and getting feedback from parents, certainly there's a recognition that we have adapted well to this environment. I think people recognize that their challenges remain and continue as part of the educational approach with individuals, but certainly the feedback we've gotten from teachers, from parents and guardians is that they seem satisfied with the way things are moving on. We recognize that we aren't addressing perhaps all the same expectations as we would in a regular year, but certainly, again, the feedback has been positive from the student perspective, the family perspective, and the teaching perspective as well.
Supplementary, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
And what about Sean? Have you had much feedback about the lack of extracurriculars and clubs? And have you established any clubs yet, or is that something for the future?
And responding through you, Mr. Chair, I think students recognize this was going to be a different year. There's certainly disappointment that some of those regular teams won't be meeting right now. There's a number of activities that are running. I work on an equity and diversity team, so we've been meeting virtually this way, and certainly the students are getting used to this. I don't know if all of the adults are yet, but we have certainly are able to accomplish what we set out to do. I'm involved with our student council. They're meeting the same way. So they're recognizing that it's not the same as sitting down together, and there are some challenges, but many of the groups and clubs are working through that through this kind of a medium. But certainly it doesn't, we're not able to play football or soccer through the online environment. So there are those challenges. But I think students recognize that that was something that we were going to have to deal with, and in some cases have resigned themselves to the fact that this is a pause right now on those kind of activities.
Thank you.
Trustee Armstrong, then Trustee Warren.
Oh, hi, Sean. My question is in regards to the virtual school. From what I've heard, it's common for the virtual students to leave their video off during synchronous learning on Google Meet. Do you think that this creates a culture of learning disengagement and negatively impacts their relationship with their teacher and peers?
Responding through you, Mr. Chair. I think very often there's a practical reason around that, and part of the streaming challenges with bandwidth creates some problems when everyone has their audio and their visual on. And I think also kids are very good about tasking at a number of different things at the same time. So as much as there may be that teaching going on, students may be doing some research around that in the background and searching perhaps on their personal devices. So I think it's a practical situation with what we are dealing with right now. I can't speak to the fact that it's creating a level of disengagement necessarily. In the sessions that I'm part of with teachers, I still certainly feel they're in the same position in some cases with their audio and their visual off, but certainly using the chat function as well. There seems to be a continuous engagement around that, and I hope that the students are able to manage that well enough.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So when the teacher directs them to a group learning, would it be beneficial for the teacher to encourage the students to leave their video on to have a better group learning environment?
And through you, Mr. Chair, certainly I know that there are some teachers definitely taking that approach, and in some cases there's breakout opportunities for students where it's a smaller group of peers where they are able to do that and perhaps are taking advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you.
Trustee Warren. And Trustee
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the off day with regards to the students going to school. Are you finding that there's a disconnect of workload or the level of work that the students are supposed to be doing? Because I mean, speaking of my own behalf, I know my daughter goes to St. Joe's, and she's in grade 9, and her off day seems like to be a day off of gaming and stuff, and because her work is done pretty much the night before. So do you have any feedback or from whether even parents or teachers on that?
Responding through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I think there's, first of all, a recognition of wellness around this, and a recognition that perhaps for 6 hours a day, every day, it's a lot for students to be consuming through this online environment. We gave our staff the opportunity at the beginning when they set up their courses to let students know, is this going to be something where you're providing the information every 2 days so students can spread that out? They have that option. In some cases, teachers are establishing a workspace at the outset of the week. So really it's up to students in some cases to manage their time through that. We recognize that that can be a challenge for students, but part of that is giving them that opportunity to do it and be assessing and assisting them through that, because that is certainly something that we all have to learn, a skill in terms of organizing our time, organizing the material we have to work on.
Just a supplementary, Mr. Chair. I agree with that 100%. I think the feedback I'm getting from parents right now, though, is that they're confused as to what the second. So for the kids who go to school the one day and they're home the second day, I think they're confused as to what their obligations are or what their responsibilities are on that off day, because either students aren't being truthful and parents just really kind of left out in the loop wondering what's supposed to be happening, and are they actually getting at least a few hours worth of work to keep them busy for that day, whether it's being online or research or whatever the case may be. Maybe you can comment on that.
And to you, Mr. Chair, that was a great topic that we were able to discuss at one of our town hall meetings. Parents had a great deal of questions at the beginning of this year about that process. So we were able to address a lot of that, I think proactively, letting them know what our expectations were, that not every teacher was going to approach things the same way, but essentially the students were going to be given a unit of study for the week, and in some cases they were going to have to manage their time around that. So I think parents early on received the message that there would be some self-guided management and organization on the part of students, which certainly is an important skill for them to develop. So we haven't had a lot of questions from parents or confusion or individuals requiring a bit of an explanation around that. And perhaps that's because we did get out in front and provide that explanation to the community.
Thanks, Sean.
Trustee Moore, then Mr. Bennett.
Hello, through you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Sean. I've gotten to spend quite a few grads with you on stage, and I know it's a highlight of the year, and this year was very different. So do you have any highlights from last Friday that you'd like to share?
Mr. Chair, just seeing the kids come back, because we had not seen them in a lot of cases since March. And I think through all the planning, we really didn't stop to anticipate what that would be like. But in a lot of cases, it was very emotional. And not only just to have the kids there, but to have the parents. And I mean, that was a great opportunity for feedback from these parents. And they were there for their sons and daughters, but the number of them that took the time to thank the school staff for the special day, it was really nice to see. It wasn't anticipated. This was something we wanted to provide for the kids, but once the students and parents started arriving, I think it was great to see how much it meant for them and the great feedback that we were getting. So really a simplistic approach to graduation, one we had to take, but certainly fruitful at that.
Yes, not very often you actually get to meet all the parents to each child.
That's right.
Good. Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Mr. Bennett.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just going to comment to Trustee Warren that I could give like a student outlook on how the days off work. I'm not sure if you're still interested or if Mr. Kelly answered all your questions on that.
No, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
All right, good, thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, basically the way that it works, I have two classes, and obviously I'm in grade 12, so the workload's probably going to be higher, but I have chemistry and math. And the way it works for us is we do all of our lessons in class primarily. And then on the days off, we fill in some notes that our teacher will give us. This is math specifically, with the kind of like the easier problems to solve. And then we do mainly like a couple hours of homework with regards to that. And then in chemistry, we do all the advanced confusing concepts in class where we can ask our teacher for help. And then usually we read up on the more basic theory on textbooks or in class. So for us, I'd almost say that the majority of the work you actually do is at home, and mainly in class is asking teachers questions on the readings you've done at home, type of thing. I'm sure Namir can give her point too.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great insight. I think it's probably subject specific too, right? Because if you're in physics, for example, or health or something, maybe it's totally different. So. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Trustee Simpson, did I see you raise your hand? No? Any other questions or comments? Seeing none? Thank you very much. Mr. Kelly? Can I get a mover for the Trustee McEwen? Seconded by Trustee Curry. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Leading and Learning dated October 6, 2020, entitled Secondary Principal Leading During a Pandemic be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks very much, Sean. Item L4, memo from the Superintendent of Human Resources, reclass size compliance. Superintendent McCabe, welcome.
Good evening again, Mr. Chair. As you well know, we are required to be compliant to the Ministry of Education on class sizes, and tonight I'm pleased to report that we are indeed compliant in all of our classes, both with our bricks and mortar school and with our virtual classes. As you will see on page 9 of your agenda, I provided a chart indicating average class sizes, and this is as of September 30th, which is again the ministry requirement. The second chart is simply a reminder that I have presented before of the ministry regulations regarding class size averages and class caps, but it's just a good reference for you, Mr. Chair, and the team to take a look at. We do recognize that we still have a pressure point with our grade 7 and 8 virtual class sizes. As you can see in the chart that I provided, it is the highest average. And again, it's our hope to be able to address these larger virtual classes by providing some additional staffing at the intermediate level to take some pressure off those larger classes. That should happen in the coming days with some good information that we have received from the ministry. Finally, I do want to briefly share again our overall staffing numbers. So you have heard from our director before, but this is both in our virtual programs and our in-school programs. At last count, Mr. Chair, we had 2,715 permanent teachers in our board. And of this number, we have 270 that are in our K-6 elementary virtual school. We have 44 teaching in our 7-8 virtual academy and 140 teachers in our 7-12 virtual academy. So, Mr. Chair, that's a brief report sort of supplementing an earlier report that I have provided, but just reminding you and all that we are compliant, as we like to mark in September that has happened and submitted to that. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. It's always good to see that we're compliant and better than compliant. Trustee Armstrong. I think he just cut himself off.
Yes, Director D'Amico, through you, Mr. Chair, for Director D'Amico.
Go ahead.
Tom, I believe the ministry agrees that consolidation of classes is up to individual school boards. Are we consolidating classes? And if so, have any classes been eliminated?
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually, I'm going to refer that to Superintendent McCabe. He would have the firsthand knowledge of our consolidation process.
Thank you, Mr. D'Amico. Through you, Mr. Chair. Even with consolidation, we have to be compliant. So while it is true there may have been some consolidation to manage very small classes, none of them, again, would exceed compliance. But it does happen indeed, and I wouldn't have the specific numbers, but Trustee Armstrong, I'd be happy to get those for you. But as a general rule, we avoid that where possible. But if we have particularly small classes, we might be compliant. We might move to some amalgamation of those classes. But as I said, we would only do so still staying under class caps and still being compliant. I hope that helps. Specific information in terms of numbers, I'd be happy to provide.
Follow-up question?
Go ahead.
So some of the consolidations you're talking about, would it be true to say increase the class size?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. There would be some increase to class size, but as I've said, still within the manageable class average that's permissible by the ministry and within class caps. So as you know, our director had earlier given us direction to ensure that our in-school classes are intentionally smaller so that the virtual classes might be a little bit bigger with full awareness of cohorting and the situation that we're in. So that's why you'll see on the chart provided that the in-person classes are a little bit smaller. Considering those and the virtual class sizes, that's how we've come up with our averages. Again, maintaining compliance and class caps as required.
Thank you, Superintendent McCabe.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Simpson.
Just a comment to Superintendent McCabe. Thank you very much for supplying us these numbers. And I think that I know I've heard from parents in the parent community that they're very encouraged that their children have gone back, and we've really worked very hard to keep class sizes down, and we've intentionally made virtual classes larger. I think that they appreciate the effort that the board has taken in trying to keep classes small in person. So thanks.
Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Superintendent McCabe. You mentioned that the smaller class sizes in person classes because of the COVID situation and everything, and I understand that. But in the most of the classes are fairly even, like 9 to 12 is 16 and 17, so they're pretty even. But in 7 and 8 there's quite a divergence, and in 4 to 6 there's quite a divergence. Is that just all based on the COVID situation, or are there some pedagogy teaching reasons why they can be a little bigger on the virtual side in those classes?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for that question. The reality is, in terms of demographics and where larger numbers fall, and then where teachers are aligned and so on. So partly that is part of the reason why you might see a little bit of an imbalance, why they don't look all exactly the same. Again, principals are working as diligently as possible to make sure that classes are balanced. You would notice the 34 under the 7-8 virtual, that's one we're well aware of, and we're trying to bring that number down. We're happy with the other average class sizes because they certainly, as you say, Trustee Curry, pedagogically speaking, there's that makes sense, especially with the cohorting and the pandemic that we're dealing with. I don't know if I've addressed your question specifically. There was no strategy not to have them be as balanced as possible. We're certainly working with the demographics that we have to make them as balanced as much as possible.
Oh, just a supplementary, Mr. Chair. So Superintendent McKay, the ideal would be to have them sort of in person and virtually the same if they could be. I mean, there's no teaching reasons why virtual can be bigger for some reason that it's easier to teach or something.
For you, Mr. Chair, I think the intention of having our larger virtual classes is a health reason. It's about the pandemic, and it's about having students be in a safer environment and in a class where we want to make sure there certainly is the masking and the social distancing and so on. Just a little bit easier if the class pressures are off and have this a little bit smaller.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Moore, then Trustee Simpson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent, I was just wondering if you could clarify for me, please. In the grades 9 to 12, it says that in person there's 16 students. So that would be grade 9 math. There'd be 8 students in cohort A and 8 students in cohort B. Am I reading that right, or am I misinterpreting?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Keep in mind that's an average. So certainly 9 to 12, that's a large group of students. That wouldn't mean every class is at 16, as our student trustees would know. On the other hand, it is true that with those smaller classes, half the cohort in on one day would mean a very small class. That's absolutely.
So we'd have very, sorry, Mr. Chair, supplemental?
Go ahead.
So does that mean that we would have very few classes across the system that would be over the 15 per cohort?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, that's correct.
Thank you very much.
Cohort day, correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Trustee Simpson?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Superintendent McCabe, do we have any indication of children sitting on wait lists to go into the virtual school in November, and those that are planning on coming back to in person? Are you worried about some kind of an upheaval that we're gonna have to start from square one? Are you collecting that information yet?
Mr. Chair, absolutely. Our senior team with our director and associate director are fully aware and working on wait lists and so on. And so I don't have a plan that I could tell you right now. Perhaps our director does, but just to let you know that we're certainly looking at our wait list and looking at the possibility of accommodating those who are on our wait list.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Trustee Armstrong.
Superintendent McCabe, my question is similar to Cindy. What worries me is when the time comes for that shift back and forth, that we have a flood of kids coming to virtual. So do we have the capacity to absorb that problem?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would certainly be looking at where are the pressures and where are the requests to have students return either to a bricks and mortar school or to virtual, depending on that transition. Once we have done that sort of a thorough review of those numbers, then we certainly would take a look at what's possible. There's many variables in seeing, in terms of the staffing who are available, where are the needs back at the school that they're coming from. So there's a lot to consider in terms of that, but absolutely, we're designing a plan to address the waitlist question right now, and hope to have more information on that in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. McCabe. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Simpson and Trustee Moore. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Human Resources dated October 7, 2020, entitled Class Size Compliance be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L5, memo from the Superintendent of Finance Administration, read trustee honoraria for 2020-2021. Welcome, Superintendent Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the memo in front of you is a regular annual report to seek board approval for the trustee honorarium calculations for the upcoming year starting December 1st, 2020. The calculations have been done in accordance with a previously passed resolution by the board, which was done so in October 2018. And that resolution was designed to be in accordance with the regulation on trustee honorarium, which is regulation 35706. Basically, that regulation requires or provides that all trustees receive a base amount of honorarium of $5,900 per year per trustee. And in addition to that, that all trustees receive an enrollment amount of $175 per enrollment, which is a full-time average daily enrollment. So in addition to this, the chair and vice chair receive an additional base allowance for their work of $5,000 and $2,500 respectively, and 5 cents per enrollment for the chair and 2.5 cents per enrollment for the vice chair. So that provides their additional allowance. Based on our enrollment, there was an enrollment growth of 1,562 students, which was an increase from 41,989 average daily enrollment to 43,551, and that provides for honorarium increases for trustees, increase of $273 per year up to $13,521. For the vice chair, an increase of $312 up to $17,110. And for the chair, an increase of $352 up to $20,699. So that completes my report, and I'm pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Armstrong?
Superintendent Shimmons, my question is related to the document that's attached. It's under the attendance amounts. Do you need a second to get there?
I'm good.
Okay, so just a clarification of the attendance amount may be paid to a member for attending any meeting of a committee of the board that is required to be established by an act or regulation made under an act. Just clarifying, could you give me an example of that?
So thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So that attendance amount would be for a statutory committee such as SEAC, the Audit Committee, and I want to call it SALIP. Is it called SIP now? So it's the statutory committees under the Education Act. However, in October 2018, when the bylaw was passed, the board decided that they would pay no amount for attendance at these meetings, so that they would waive that amount. I don't know the reason for that, but generally that type of a decision is made because not all trustees sit on all those statutory committees, so there would be a variance, but I can't speak to that discussion specifically as I was not here at that time.
So just to follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So just to confirm, a statutory committee could get up to $50 if the trustees agree to that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So the regulation would permit that, but the regulation requires the board to produce a bylaw, and our bylaw does not permit that. So it would require a change to that.
Thank you.
And we've never paid that extra $50 in my 20 whatever years since amalgamation. Trustee Coburn?
I'll move it.
Is there any other questions before I cut it off? A seconder? Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Lawrence, that the memorandum from the Superintendent of Finance and Administration dated October 7th, 2020, entitled Trustee Honorary for 2020-2021 be received, and that the following trustee honorary amounts for the period of December 1st, 2020 to November 30th, 2021 be approved. Chair, $20,699 per year. Vice Chair, $17,110 per year.
Read.
Oh, the last one now. And trustees, $13,521. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. We're on again. Memo from the Superintendent of Finance Administration re additional funding for COVID-19. Superintendent Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is in respect of an announcement that was received on October 5th from the province, where an additional $35 million worth of funding was announced for 4 high priority areas in the province, of which Ottawa was one of those. And we will be receiving $1.7 million as part of this announcement. So the funding is intended to provide additional supports beyond what we currently have for both buildings, schools and face-to-face in buildings, as well as schools that are remote. And those the funding criteria is for hiring additional classroom support, such as teachers, early childhood educators, educational assistants, and in virtual schools, in addition, technological devices for students and staff. So the exec team is currently reviewing the needs in both the buildings and the virtual school. We're immediately putting supports in place to hire additional teachers. So as you heard in a prior report, Superintendent McCabe announced that in coming days, we're looking at hiring teachers to address the grade 7-8 class size that we were just speaking about. We're also reviewing the needs for educational assistants and teachers as we move to a transition when we address the wait list for the virtual school. And last but not least, any of the technology needs that are required in order to deliver virtual school. So operating two systems, virtual and face-to-face, can be a particular challenge financially in addition to other challenges. So it does require more staffing. And additionally, moving students between models during the year creates an additional need for staff. So kids don't arrive in groupings of 20 or 24 and a half. They arrive in odd numbers. So when trying to explain why during the year that change for additional staff, for example, if we had 20 primary classes and each class had one student that wanted to move from face-to-face learning into virtual learning, we would have 20 students that would need a teacher in virtual learning. So we'd require that additional teacher. However, if the classes that were in the buildings were close to class size, we wouldn't be able to find that teacher there. So there would be an additional pressure for that student. In some cases, we may be able to adjust class sizes where they're extremely small, as we've seen in the past, as we were reviewing class sizes of 3 to 5. So we know that those are extremely small. The difference having to do that during the year is when students are actually in the desks or sitting in the seats, it's much more difficult to reorganize and find some savings to provide additional staffing than in the spring when students are on paper as opposed to sitting in the seats. So during the year does create that additional need for staffing, or for staffing budget. So right now we're continuing to review the significant pressures, and we're researching the emergency needs in the schools for both teachers and EAs. And then we will be looking at how we use this $1.7 million to supplement the changeover of the waiting list from either virtual to buildings or buildings to virtual. So that completes my report, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Trustee Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Superintendent Shimmons. It's great to get the extra funding and for teachers and EAs and ECCs, but are teachers, EAs, and ECCs available? Or we keep always hearing about there's a shortage of teachers. Are they available? I mean, it's great to have the funds, but are we going to be able to hire the people we need?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a question that I can answer generally because it was asked this afternoon as part of our review in looking at the staffing piece. And Superintendent McCabe assures us that their team is currently recruiting and onboarding staff, teachers as well as EAs, so that he's assured us that the staffing is being secured and ready for when we require it. If we require any further details, I would have to hand that over to him.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Armstrong.
Superintendent Shimmons, does the additional COVID-19 funding apply to the hiring of classroom supervisors for additional classroom hiring supports?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the criteria for the additional COVID funding from the memo is exactly what's provided in the memo to you. So I've taken that directly from the ministry memo, and it's the additional hiring supports, teachers, ECEs, educational assistants, as well as technological devices in the virtual school. So my understanding of hiring classroom supervisors, our classroom supervisors are replacement staff in order to provide whenever a qualified teacher is absent from teaching. So I don't think it would be precluded from using some of this money in order to cover if there was an absent teacher, but I don't think it's the main focus of it. The main focus of it is to help the high priority boards within the province to address some of the more challenging concerns that we're having. We have, I believe, an average of about 25% of students in our virtual academy, and I know boards surrounding us rurally have 10%. So It does create that added pressure whenever we're in a high priority area as we've moved into phase 2, and that creates that additional staffing pressure. The classroom supervisors are really, they're not permanent positions. They're positions to help out for a day or two at a time to replace those absent teachers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. D'Amico.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to follow up on what Superintendent Shimmons was mentioning in terms of the classroom supervisors. Certainly the funds that we received are not enough to go towards all of the needs we have in the system for more teachers and more EAs and ECEs. So we would need more than the amount that was allocated from the government to meet all of our demands. So that's where those funds will be directed. The classroom supervisors, it's not an area that we're funding. That's an emergency that would come out of our current budget for vocational teachers only when we can't fill it with an occasional teacher. So I don't want the trustees to leave with the impression that we're intentionally going out to hire classroom supervisors. That's not our goal. Our goal is to have more occasional teachers, more permanent teachers, more EAs, and that's where those funds are needed. I also want to add that trustee mentioned earlier in the evening in terms of collapsing of classes. Intentionally, we want to use these funds to try and prevent that from happening. So where we have an option to put a permanent teacher into the virtual program and leave our current classes at the low class size they currently sit at, that's our priority.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Coburn. Second by Trustee Warren, that the memorandum from the Superintendent of Finance and Administration dated October 7, 2020, entitled Additional Funding for COVID-19 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. You again. Memo from the Superintendent of Finance and Administration, re Ottawa Student Transportation Authority for September 2020. Superintendent Shimmons.
And thank you. So the memo of the OSTA update that's before you is to provide an overview of our September operations. So September started our transportation, and OSTA began with 36,000 students taking about 613 large yellow buses, an additional 3,000 students being transported on vans and wheelchairs, wheelchair transportation. And in addition to that, 9,000 students that were provided with Presto passes, although up to 30% of those 9,000 students were not using the Presto passes. So if you add those up, it comes to about 48,000 students were being transported in some form between the two Ottawa boards. September 8th started a rolling startup for the vans. And as the drivers were ready, they were contacting the parents and the students in order to ensure that they could start a rolling startup. And about a week later, on September 14th, the rolling startup began for the yellow buses. On September 11th and that following weekend, an OSTA announced that there were 37 routes that were canceled. And while this was an inconvenience to parents, naturally, the first priority was safety, so that decision was required to be made. At that time, approximately 100 or more drivers were short, that left about 90 routes short right now, or 37 routes short at the time, rather. And in the meantime, I can update in the last little bit of 100 plus drivers short. We've received in the last week 7 or 8 new drivers. A new operator. OSTA has put on some coaches in order to do a couple more of the routes. And as well, some of the operators are borrowing drivers. So while we're short drivers, there is a bit of a trickling effect in order to cover that off. And they are working with a communication plan with parents, and they're pushing out the communication for parents to opt out when they're not using the buses that can create more space on those yellow buses. So that was the startup. From the communication perspective, on September 8th, the call center opened, and there was almost 60,000 email subscribers. So obviously with the the reduction in reduction in drivers. There's a requirement for parents to check the different social media aspects or receive notification by email. And so OSTA has done quite a good job at putting that communication out on Twitter and Facebook and the website. So if you had an opportunity to look at the website, they have quite an expanded communication on there, and they do regular communications about cancellations. It also includes some electronic safety videos for training. OSTA did report as well, the active transportation had a very good uptake and was encouraged by the schools. So they were thankful to the schools for that, that partnership. So that active transportation included programs like Walk a Block and Roll Meetup Maps, where students could use that group transportation to school. And that helped reduce some of the vehicle congestion at school sites, as you can imagine, with parents driving their children. OSTA also worked with the city before the startup to secure additional crossing guards and to increase police enforcement around the schools to mitigate the risks. And in addition, has been working on a number of strategies to provide the transportation to cover off for the shortage of drivers. So they've been doubling routes and route splitting. Every available personnel that it's at, an operator who would normally do a mechanic or a trainer or a dispatcher with their bus license, have been getting on the yellow bus and doing the driving. They've moved routes between operators and split routes in order to expand the number of routes that are available to students. They moved some students from the yellow bus to public transit, so OC Transpo Presto passes, where there was room available and where there was service available. They set up coach buses to run shuttles to congregated stops in rural high schools. They were able to secure one new operator to reinstate a yellow bus in a rural area, and they were trying to prioritize rural areas, not having any other option for transportation in those areas. Opting out and daily discussion. So those are some of the means that that they're employing in order to cover off some of those driver shortages in some of the areas. Also in September, there was an additional requirement for OSTA that they haven't experienced any previously, and they distributed their first inventory of PPE and cleaning supplies to the operators. So that's the PPE and cleaning supplies that it's received directly from the MCGS ministry warehouse and is shipped to school boards and to transportation consortiums. So I'm told that they received approximately 100 skids that then had to be redistributed to the operators for cleaning and for PPE for the drivers. So I think that covers the most of the startup, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Trustee Coburn.
Lisa, you know, I know this is evolving like everything else with this. The numbers of students that we're transporting now, do we have an idea in terms of capacity as to what that represents? Does that represent 50%, 75% of the students we would typically transport?
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I don't have a percentage. The challenge there is the process, because of the timing in August of the changes. The process were for parents to opt out rather than get confirmation parents to have to opt in on the bus. So there would be parents who chose not to opt out, but are not using the bus service. So if we did have the manpower in the schools to be able to inventory each of those buses coming in and get an average on how full those buses are, that could produce that percentage that you're asking. Unfortunately, at this time, the schools are at capacity to be able to manage the changes that are going on because of the pandemic. So it's not something that's been surveyed.
Can I have a supplemental, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
How are the operators faring through this in terms of financial capacity? So clearly, they're transporting less students, but they're tasked with cleaning and PPE and stuff like that. So do we have any idea how operators are managing financially through this?
So the CEO of OSTA is our contact that communicates directly with the operators. The ministry did provide some additional funding for busing, both from the ministry level as well, so the provincial level as well as the federal level. So there have been some requests, without getting into specific details. There have been some requests because they are incurring some additional costs to distribute that money to them. And we are still in talks about that particular, what the details of that might be. But the PPE and the cleaning supplies that are required for the operators are coming from the ministry, and our understanding is that's not going to be charged back to the boards or charged back to the operators. There is some that they did go out and purchase in the summer in preparation for startup. So that's part of those discussions with Vicky, our head of OSTA.
Thank you.
Trustee McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Lisa. Do we know if there are any students that cannot get to school? And if we know who they are, can we do something for them?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I can't answer that specifically, but I can say that Vicky and OSTA have looked at every option and continue to look at every option in order to make the transportation available to parents and ensure that there's thorough communication for those parents. So even as late as today, we received another email where she has another idea of how to assist some of those families that are getting the route cancellations and what we might be able to do where OC Transpo is available. So we're she's exploring that, and we're going to try and put that into place. I can also add that, as I mentioned, there's certain higher priority schools where there's need, as well as the rural schools where there is no other form of transportation, where she is prioritizing to put the routes that we do have available, so the yellow equipment and the drivers, into those areas, and bringing into town some of the areas where there's more walkers, where there's alternate means of transportation for the students, where they might have access and could be switched over to OC Transpo. It is quite a process, though, and it does take some time, but she's certainly looking at all and every option. I can't say specifically if we do have a count on how many students are not attending.
Director D'Amico.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the trustees' question, we did survey a number of our principals with that question. We don't have an absolute number, but the feedback we received was that the far majority of parents were finding a way to get their children to school. So whether it was grandparents or neighbors or others that were able to drive them, and the cases where they were not, which seems to be very few, they were going on the learning management system. So they still were getting the work from the school, and they were prioritized as well if they were able to go to the virtual program. So we are trying to find solutions. So there still may be cases across the system where a student is not able to get to school, and that's their preference, but it's a small number as compared to the number of routes that have been canceled. It just shows the ingenuity and the perseverance of parents to find ways to get their kids to school.
Is there any other questions? Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Lawrence, seconded by Trustee Curry. The memorandum from the Superintendent of Finance Administration dated October 7th, 2020, entitled Ottawa Student Transportation Authority Update for September 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Superintendent Shimmons. We have no new business. We have no notice of motions. Confirmation of the action report, please. Trustee Moore and Trustee Armstrong. The action report covering the period of September 22nd, 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Inquiries, administrative announcements. Superintendent, Director D'Amico.
Through you, Mr. Chair, trustees may recall one of our student trustees named Daniel McInnes from 2014-15. I received an email from Daniel this afternoon. He asked that I pass on hello to all of the trustees, and he wanted to share with you that he graduated last year from mechanical engineering at U of T. He was a Shoelist Award winner, $80,000 scholarship, and he's just accepted a job in Ireland, working for Logitech. And in Ireland, he's just started in September. He wanted to pass on that he's working on creative projects, gaming, and educational pursuits. And he did thank the board for all of their work in preparing him for that. And I will note that he signed off his letter. His new name is Danny McGuinness. So he's in Ireland. So wanted to pass that on that for our student trustees, for Namir and Patrick, that good things come from those that were student trustees.
Great. Trustee Lawrence.
Just to add on to that, he was a St. FX student, and he was just absolutely wonderful. He could do so much. He would go with the flow. He was just, that's so nice to hear, Tom. Thanks a million for that.
Well, it's the bewitching hour. Motion to adjourn, please. Trustee Coburn, Trustee Simpson at 9:21. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This too will